I have some updates for you guys. If you have not been paying attention, it has been 9 rounds and Kevin McCarthy has still not been elected as Speaker of the House. Now, that's what I saw before I went live. If anything changed since I started talking on here, please let me know. But so what we have here, and we talked about this the other day, is the fact that you have a group of Republican politicians in the House that have decided to force the vote, so to speak, on someone like a Kevin McCarthy, that they would not vote for him unless they got certain concessions. So they made a number of demands. Actually, I'm just going to call them demands. They made a number of demands. Some of them appear to be personal, but some of them do appear to be rules oriented. Like one of the things they wanted to do is that they wanted to make it easier to remove a speaker. So that was one of the things they wanted. Another one has to deal with the budget. Like they want to deal with the deficit spending. So that's another thing they brought up. So I know some people are saying it's all personal. It's not all personal. There's other things in there as well, right? Okay. Now, whether I agree with their demands or not, that is besides the point. Because this event that is taking place right before our eyes and is on national television for everyone to see, it just kind of, it brings back old memories, you know? It brings back memories of force the vote on the left and the force the vote town hall. Now, I didn't have my show back then, but I watched all of it. I watched that whole thing play out. And seeing them chip away at Kevin McCarthy and seeing him get taken down round after round after round, and him add more concessions or agree to more concessions, it stings a little bit because that's what we could have had. But we didn't have people that were willing to do it. On top of not having people that were willing to do it, we had people who decided to change their mind. In the beginning, it appeared that everybody was on board for this. That includes people like Cenk Uygur, Sam Seder, etc. I don't want to say too much because Briahna Joy Gray is going to get into that into a segment I'm going to show later on about what happened there. But somewhere along the way, there was some information that went out that was not true. And I feel that this really hurt the action. And that information came from Cenk Uygur. So let's go back. Cenk Uygur said, for all people pushing Fraud Squad, do you understand that if all 10 Justice Dems had voted present, GOP leader would be speaker right now? What would that have accomplished? Easy being destructive. You have to come up with a plan for being constructive. So the problem is that was actually false. If that were true, then Hakeem Jeffries would be speaker right now. You see how these things just come? They have a way of coming right back. That wasn't true. That message was spread not just on Twitter, but on TYT's platform. So that message went out to hundreds and thousands of people. And even though their own audience, because they polled them, even though their own audience was in favor of forcing the vote, they still were against it. They backed away. We'll get into the reason why. But as we watch things unfold with this speakership situation with Kevin McCarthy, you can't help but feel a little bitter in a sense. And Jimmy Dore put it so eloquently. Today's events are confirming that our idea was 100% correct, and the progressives in Congress are phonies who turned on their own supporters and became proud establishment hacks. Everyone who opposed it are now revealed as huge liars and gaslighters. And we're going to get into the gaslighting part because people are still doing it, by the way. Just a reminder of what we were asking, right? Okay. So it stings a little bit. 'Cause. 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 a lot of people, they want to blame Jimmy Dore for this, but this was something that came from the DSA handbook. So Jimmy did talk about this. I just want to show that piece because I want you to see this. Because for all the people pointing fingers at Jimmy Dore, again, you have to understand where it came from.
Anyway, it doesn't matter. All these internet DSO, everybody's trying. The DSA, the people at the DSA, which is a completely corrupt organization. Now, not the members. The members join in good faith, but the people who lead that organization are 100% corrupt. 100%. They're not who you think they are. They're getting paid by somebody. They got a phone call because they're not even doing the thing that they put in their own goddamn handbook. It's in their own handbook. What's right here? It says the House Pressure Campaign Guide. And what does it say? It says we need to now. This is 2019. We need now to fight back against the assault in an unshakable working class movement capable of forcing politicians to reject lobbyists' influence. Now is the time to be clear about our demands and pressure politicians to get on board. Pushing a floor vote in the House not only tests the political strength of the movement to make that happen, it also sends the bill to the Senate, calling the question there. Though we know Medicare for All will not become a reality under the Trump administration, a House floor vote is the best which side are you on political opportunity in 2019, and it sets the stage to make Medicare for All the decisive issue of 2020. They then pretended they didn't write that.
Okay, so here's the problem. Again, you can see this online yourself, this DSA handbook here, but I've read through that whole policy, so I know what they were supposed to do. And even in their language there, they tell you, we know it's not going to become a reality that you're going to get Medicare for All under a Trump administration. So they said that. Now, for the people who are coming back at us and they make these statements like, doesn't make any sense, it wasn't going to pass. DSA pointed that out in their own handbook, but DSA still wanted you to do it. You see the difference, right? But you notice those people who criticize the rest of us that say, no, they were still supposed to do it. They're not criticizing DSA's handbook, which is exactly what it says in the handbook. They're criticizing podcasters instead of DSA's own language. Let's go on.
DSA. And their leadership was MIA during Force the Vote, except when they would come on Twitter to shit on Force the Vote, the thing that's in their own handbook. So now you know what's happened in the left. The corporate America has completely co-opted left organizations, which is why you haven't heard shit about Medicare for All the whole time Joe Biden has been president, and you haven't even heard anything about the public option. Nothing. Right. They're not doing a fucking thing at the DSA except gaslighting you and taking your revolutionary progressive energy and sticking it right in the ass of a fucking corporation and a party. That's what the DSA is there to do, and I'm there to disabuse you of the idea that they're there to help you. Go ahead. Go.
Okay, I wanted to show that piece there, and I want to say something really quick about DSA. DSA, in my opinion, should remove the word socialist from their name. Stop calling yourself DSA. Start calling them DOA, Democrats of America, or Dead on Arrival. Whichever one you guys pick, because they're not making anything happen. They're really not. Now, this organization, to me, based on what I've seen, it appears to be more of a social club, because they have this handbook that gives you all of these suggestions and also different strategy. It's all laid out there for you. Different types of policies, different types of beliefs, what they stand for, their platform, but they don't hold the members accountable for not following any of that. They don't remove these politicians that are a part of DSA for not following any of that. So to me, this is just like a social club. Doesn't really seem like it's doing anything here. Now, people are still, today, this week, they are still trying to give a message about force the vote that was not correct. And one of those people is Anna Kasparian. So I want you to see what she had to say. Now, this is recent. This is not 2020. Watch Anna Kasparian lie about force the vote. She's still lying about it. Listen to this.
I want to read one super chat because it asks an important question. I actually was tempted in talking about this a little bit in the previous segment, but I decided against it. Now I'm going to. The question is, can you explain how this force the vote is different than Dems force the vote? There are lots of force the vote proponents who say AOC should have done what the Republicans are doing now with Pelosi in 2020. Well, remember, force the vote was about withholding votes for Nancy Pelosi's speakership role until she made the concession that there would be a floor vote on single payer healthcare in the House, which would have failed. Okay, so the ask was for a vote that would fail. I mean, at this point, I almost just wish that it would have happened because.
Let me explain what Anna Kasparian is doing here, because this is Anna Kasparian gaslighting her audience. And I talked about this on Twitter because Anna Kasparian knows exactly what the strategy was for force the vote. Again, like I told you in the beginning, they were all on board for it. We'll get into that later as to why people walked away. But she knows exactly what the strategy was. The strategy was not necessarily to get Medicare for all to pass. They knew they did not have the votes. The strategy was to get those politicians on record, and the ones who voted against it, those politicians should be primary challenged. That was the strategy of force the vote. Oh, and by the way, they could have forced the vote on anything. It didn't have to just be Medicare for all, Anna, and she knows that too. They could have forced the vote on canceling student loan debt. They could have forced the vote on universal pre-K. They could have forced the vote on any of those progressive issues that they ran on. So this whole thing about Medicare for all and it was going to fail, so there was no point in doing it, that was not the strategy, and that was not the point of force the vote. And Anna Kasparian knows that. So she is sitting here and she is intentionally gaslighting her audience. Even today. Let's go on.
Because I would give anything to have Briahna Joy Gray move on with her life and maybe talk about something different. Like, it's ridiculous. But this McCarthy situation is different because the concessions that McCarthy has agreed to don't even matter for the group of Republicans who refuse to vote.
She had to throw in. Watch this. You see this little jab?
And at this point, I almost just wish that it would have happened because I would give anything to have Briahna Joy Gray move on with her life and maybe talk about something different. Like, it's ridiculous.
Why is it ridiculous, Anna? Why can't she talk about it? Considering what is happening right in front of us this week right now, why can't Bri talk about it? And by the way, it's not just her talking about it. Other people are bringing it up too. We see what's happening right before our eyes. You want Bri to stop talking about it so people can stop pointing their fingers back at you. That's why you want her to stop talking about it, because you guys lied about force the vote. Boy, I tell you.
But this McCarthy situation is different because the concessions that McCarthy has agreed to don't even matter for the group of Republicans who refuse to vote for him, okay? They don't care about the concessions. They don't trust him, and they've said so. They don't.
Now, I told you some of it was personal, but I also told you that some of the concessions that they're asking for have to deal with different processes, changing the rules on removing the speaker, the budget issue, the deficit. It's not just because they don't like him. There are other things that they have asked for, but Anna Kasparian isn't going to tell her audience that again. She is gaslighting the people.
Don't trust him. They're not going to vote for him. It's not about concessions. The whole force the vote thing was about an ask that would have ultimately failed and could have potentially hurt single payer healthcare or the pursuit of single payer healthcare, because maybe some who might be open-minded to it would be less open-minded to it if it's already failed through a House vote. You get what I'm saying?
No, I don't get what you're saying. I don't get what Anna is saying. It would hurt it. This sounds like CIA talking points. And this is not to say that she is affiliated with them. I want to be very clear. But it's that same type of rhetoric to where it's like, we can't try to do something because it may fail. You'll get people like this in the activist community as well sometimes. Those of you that do activism, like those of us at RBN, you'll find people like this too. That's how you can tell some of these people are infiltrators. You'll come up with an idea and you'll start organizing with people. And then there's that one person that you look at a little side eye and they're like, well, we can't do this because of this and it might fail. We might not get this and we might not get there. And all along, when you could have been taking those steps to get that action to happen, that person actually derails your progress and you don't end up doing anything at all. That's a CIA tactic. Those people do exist. I've met them. So Anna's point is, if something's going to fail, then just don't do it. Anna only want to do things that she know for sure is guaranteed win. What'd that tell you? Oh boy.
Anyway, but at this point, I don't even care. I wish it would have happened so we could just move on. I'm so tired of like the personal branding exercises that are like forced upon us day in, day out by people who can't move on from something that happened literally in like 2019 or 2020. But
that wasn't that long ago, Anna. She says it as though it's like that was like 10, 15 years ago. What? Someone explain this to me. Someone explain this to me. So people are still lying about it. Still lying. Just admit that you were wrong, but they can't do that because too much pride. Then you have to come to this question. Why didn't the squad force the vote? The closest I got to that was this interview with Max Blumenthal when he approached Cori Bush at the eviction moratorium at the Capitol. Listen to this. I've talked about this when it first happened, but let's revisit.
That's where we are. And I heard like last night there was a lot less people. It's great to see so many more people, but I heard there was an intense debate about the role of the squad and why the squad didn't leverage its vote for the speaker for Medicare for all vote, and why the squad, I mean, with the margin so narrow in Congress, why the squad didn't because leverage its vote on the stimulus to get a $15 minimum wage. What?
No. So first, one thing that was said last night, which is something that's very true, and I wish we would have talked about that this was where your conversation was going, because we're talking about the rally for tonight. And
she wanted him to talk about where his conversation was going ahead of time so she could walk away from that conversation. So she wouldn't have to answer that question, so she could bail. That's why she wanted to know that ahead of time. She's just deflecting.
I really would love to keep the conversation on what's happening.
I feel like it's all related to healthcare and the.
It absolutely is, but this is the thing. What was said last night is that this bill, Medicare for All, is not. No, there's no person on the squad whose bill that is. That is Bernie Sanders' bill in the Senate. It is Pramila Jayapal's bill in the House.
Let me call bullshit on this, right? So I talked about this when this interview first happened. So Cori Bush just told you that basically because it was Bernie Sanders' bill and Pramila Jayapal's bill, and none of the squad members were a part of that bill, they weren't going to support force the vote because it wasn't their bill. The Medicare for All bill wasn't their bill. But all this year, We've watched them support bills that weren't their damn bills. You see why this doesn't make any sense? That's the most ridiculous line I could have ever heard, because they weren't thinking about whether it was Bernie Sanders or Pramila Jayapal's bill when they ran on it for their campaigns. They weren't thinking about that. Watch what happens next.
It is not our bill. We can't.
And I think we just
no. There's no person on the squad whose bill that is. That is Bernie Sanders' bill in the Senate. It is Pramila Jayapal's bill in the House. It is not our bill. We cannot make that bill come to the floor. There is nothing that we can do legally to get the bill to the floor. We have.
But Pelosi could have brought the bill to the floor.
We're good here, thank you.
What? Well,
see this?
We're
See?
fine at this.
Why
I'm-
can't
we're here to
she
talk about
answer the
this.
question?
We're here.
And this has continued with Cori Bush throughout this year as well. Cori Bush doesn't want to answer tough questions. She runs away. Here comes Dude in to protect her from any more questions about force the vote. This is not the same person that was at the Ferguson protest. The same person who had that much, energy and that much fight during the Ferguson protest now doesn't even really want to speak. Make it make sense. So that was the closest explanation that we received as to why they chose not to do it. And that was from Max Blumenthal basically taking a chance there and saying, hey, I'm going to try to see if I can just go ahead and approach her and get to where I need to be. Now, in reference to the McCarthy issue, I want to show you the difference between the determination that the squad members had and the determination that the Republicans who are against McCarthy have. Listen to what Matt Gaetz says here. It's very quick, but listen.
In some way to try to divide our conference. But look, he's a desperate guy whose vote share is dropping with every subsequent vote, and I'm ready to vote all night, all week, all month, and never for that person. So I tell you what, when he comes out and heads back to his squatting in the speaker's office, which why is he even allowed to be there? Like, is there some basis in law or statute or rule for someone who comes in second place in 6 consecutive speaker races to be able to
See the difference? I'm ready to do it all night. I'll be here all night. This is what he said. All month if I have to. But we can't get that same type of rhetoric and energy from the squad. This is why people like me are pissed. Because the squad is supposed to have that type of energy. They're supposed to have that type of fight. Now, I want to go into this speech here. This is from Representative Chip Roy. I was not familiar with Chip until this morning. But Chip gave a speech here about what democracy actually looks like. Here he is criticizing his own Congress members. And even though he is a Republican, I think you might appreciate some of the things that he says about what it actually looks like to fight for something and to have an actual debate. Let's go ahead and get into that. Listen to this.
So this is what the chamber looks like when we're actually debating and the bodies are in the chairs.
So what he just said is this is what it looks like when everybody's there. So when they debate on issues,
this is what the chamber looks like when we're
everyone's
actually
not always
debating and the
present.
bodies are in the chairs. How many times have we been down here giving speeches and there's not a soul in the chamber? Yet this is what it takes to get 435 people in the chamber and have an actual debate. The American people are watching, and that's a good thing. What we're doing is exercising our rights to vote and have a debate and have a discussion about the future of this country through the decision of choosing a speaker. This is not personal. It's not. This is about the future of the country. This is about the direction of the country. American people who are looking at this body and wondering why we can pass $1.7 trillion bills that are unpaid for. They can just slide in $45 billion for Ukraine but not pay for it.
You heard that? But see, Anna Kasparian told you that it was just personal. They weren't actually asking for any concessions. Now he brings up the $40 billion going to Ukraine. Let's go on.
billion for emergency spending and not pay for it. 10% increase in defense spending, 6% increase in non-defense spending and not pay for it. And not do a thing except put language in a bill that prohibits our ability to use the money to secure the border. That bill gets rammed through, and we know exactly how it gets rammed through, because the defense world and the non-defense world come together and say, you know what, we're going to cut a deal, and we'll all go to the mics, and we're all going to give speeches, and the American people are the big losers. That's what happened.
Did you hear that? The American people are the big losers. So he's calling out the defense spending. See, guys, this piece is important. Again, I'd never heard of CHIP until this morning, but this piece here is important.
Happens. We know that's what happens. The Rules Committee sits up there and passes a bill, sends it to the floor, and we have no debate on the floor of this body. We haven't been able to offer an amendment on the floor of this body since May of 2016. The former leader and I have discussed this right here.
They had a 4,000-page bill, that $1 trillion bill, that I know damn well they didn't all have time to read 4,000 pages. The bill came out that week and it was signed that week. And that was the one where a lot of money went towards the defense. So essentially, you have people signing bills that they're barely even reading.
That's true. But the fact is, this place has to change. It has to change. And the change comes by either adopting rules and procedures that will make us actually do our job, or it comes from leadership. And people ask me, what do you want? I want the tools, or I want the leadership to stop the swamp from running over the average American every single day.
So there you have it. What's that? Matt said Chip was right today, but my broken clock was also right twice a day. I know. I was like, I have never heard of Chip until this morning, but I agree with what he was saying there. It makes perfect sense. Like, why aren't people debating about these issues? Now, I want you to hear what this woman has to say about the squad not really being this powerful force that they were supposed to be. Now, shout out to Case Study QB for this clip, because again, if you just saw the way that Matt Gaetz and Lauren Boebert were like, no, we're going to be here all night, as long as it takes. We don't have that with the squad. We don't get that from AOC. We don't get it from Cori Bush. We don't get that from none of them. What we see them doing is just bending over for corporate Democrats. They just voted in Hakeem Jeffries. And Hakeem Jeffries doesn't even want progressives there. He don't want them there. He doesn't even support the policies that they're supposed to be trying to push. He doesn't support progressive policies. He's organized PACs to try to get those people out. And let me just vote him in. No debate whatsoever. So listen to what she says.
Well, the reality for Kevin McCarthy is Pelosi's nightmare back from 2019, as I'm sure you'll remember. She was, of course, elected as House Speaker when Democrats took back control. But progressives, newly elected progressives, led by folks like Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, were openly skeptical of Pelosi's leadership, whether she should be Speaker at that time, whether it was time for generational change, and whether they would vote against her. AOC actually voted for her at that time, and Republicans booed her on the House floor for doing so. But all of this sort of shows that while Pelosi was elected Speaker at a time of these sort of left-wing rebels, that so-called squad never ended up being the threat to the Democratic Party that these right-wing rebels are ending up being to McCarthy and the larger Republican Party. And
so-called squad, they never ended up being a threat. And she compared them to the right-wing rebels that she's talking about right now. She compared them to Matt Gaetz and the rest of them, saying that they basically are actually more of a threat than the squad was supposed to be. That right there, if you are a member of the squad, you should be insulted. But they don't feel insulted. They're taking selfies of each other and not accomplishing anything. So what I tell you guys, this is on mainstream media. This is on MSNBC, or maybe they should be MSNBC. And how many people saw this because it's mainstream media? This just went out to millions of people telling them that squad is not a threat. They never ended up doing much of anything. They're nothing here. They're nothing. So what does that tell people who are DSA members and still support the squad? What does that say to people who still constantly run defense for people like AOC and Cori Bush and all the rest of them? What does that say? How does that make you feel hearing that they're not a threat at all? They're just Dems. And to show you how much of a threat they are not, you have someone here. You have this interview here with AOC. Now, there's buzz going around that AOC and some of the other progressives are actually considering voting for Kevin McCarthy to help him get speaker. So that's why she's interviewing her here. Let's listen to what she says, and then I'm going to tell you what I think about that strategy that they're trying to do to vote for Kevin McCarthy. See, it's okay for them to vote for a Republican. But the same people who criticize those of us at RBN and say we're secret right wing because we participated in a march for Medicare for All with people, some of them were conservative, we're secret right wingers, or because we heavily criticize the Democratic Party where they failed to do so because they're still trying to get access to these people, we're secret right wing to them. But here you have a Democrat politician letting you know she's willing to work with the Republicans and maybe even possibly vote for Kevin McCarthy to help him out. Now, are they going to call her right wing? I don't think so, because that's not what it's really about. Listen to this.
It did not go unnoticed, shall we say, on the internet and elsewhere, that you were on the floor having some conversations with Republicans, including Matt Gaetz and Paul Gosar. Can you enlighten us at all as to what those conversations were like? And is there any hope that you guys work together to get Hakeem Jeffries elected as Speaker of the House?
You know, I think in chaos, anything is possible. Especially.
Why is AOC, first of all, the Republicans are not going to vote for Hakeem Jeffries. Two, why is AOC referring to this force the vote strategy as chaos? Why is she calling this chaos? You mean to tell me, AOC, you are a member of DSA. So forcing the vote for Speaker of the House in an effort to get some type of concessions, you consider that to be chaos? Oh, and by the way, Jamal Bowman used the same term. You see the vocabulary, the language that they're using? Let me tell everybody, I'm going on mainstream media. Let me send this message to the masses and let people know that this type of behavior is considered chaos. You should never try to have a democratic process. You should never try to get something for your vote. That's chaos. Pay attention to that. Same person who protested outside of Nancy Pelosi's office is telling you that forcing the vote is chaos.
Especially in this era, you know, it is unlikely, but there's always a possibility. I do think that in terms of some of those conversations, I mean, listen, some of us in the House of Representatives are independent in certain ways from our party. And
some of us in the House of Representatives are independent in certain ways from our party. She's speaking of herself here. If you are independent from your party, then you should be an independent and not be a part of the party. This is a big part of the problem. Other people have done this. Other people have run as a Democrat or Republican and then changed their title to independent. Kyrsten Sinema did that. I know Justin Amash has also done that. AOC can do that right now. Miss, I'm independent of the party. You can change your affiliation to independent right now, but she's not going to do so because she really wants to be a part of the Democratic Party. Let's go on. She says something else here too. I'm going to comment on.
I do believe that in some of those conversations, there are things that are happening on the floor. These machinations are happening on the floor. And sometimes the leadership of your party, in this case, the Republican Party, will be making claims in order to try to twist arms and get people in line. And
sometimes the leadership of these parties will play games and twist your arm to get people in line. What does that say to you guys? That tells you that that is what has happened to her. That you are independent of your party, but at the end of the day, it does not matter because party leadership is going to tell you what to do. And if you don't do what party leadership wants you to do, they will get rid of you too. I'm going to show you a clip that proves that. So let's go on.
a lot of times information and truth is currency. So sometimes to be able to fact check some of the claims that McCarthy is making, whether Democrats are going to defect or not, et cetera, is important in order to keep him honest and to keep people honest in general. And so, you know, I think what was important today was to send the message that we were united behind Hakeem Jeffries as the now minority leader.
We were united behind Hakeem Jeffries as the minority leader. You see this? She is united behind the same person that doesn't even support the progressive policies. Why are you united around someone who doesn't want Medicare for all? When's the last time she mentioned Medicare for all? What do you mean you're united? He is not united with you. He doesn't support you. He doesn't support your policies. So basically, she basically decided to shut up and get in line.
Or as leader of the Democrats, and that there would be no defections, that Democrats are here, we're not going anywhere. And if they want to play ball, we're open to that.
That's going to make a lot of people, I think, on one side of the aisle very happy, and a lot of people on the other side of the aisle very concerned.
Yes, it would. If they want to play ball, we're open to that. It did not working with Republicans. Now, I hope everyone heard AOC say that, especially the people who want to smear other people as being right wing. It's okay for her to say she's open with working with Republicans. But how dare you try to organize some type of labor movement with one? How dare you go there? Now, this gentleman here, he responded to that statement that AOC made. Now, this is Dr. Michael Candleton. He said, we're going to change the Democratic Party to the Democrats are united, and there will be no defections in record time. From what working people need to what party leadership demands. Sad to see someone trade their soul for a career. Thank you so much, Dr. Candleton, because even he sees it. Now, she was speaking about party leadership. Give me 1 second. She was talking about party leadership twisting your arm.
Is that these people?
So Cynthia McKinney actually talked about that with me. This is going to be really quick. I want you to hear what Cynthia McKinney said about party leadership. Again, she was a Congress member. She was one of those people that pushed back against Democrat leadership, and they found a way to champion her by using a PAC to push her out. Listen to this.
People who are paraded before us as progressives can talk the talk, but they don't walk the walk. And so at some point, you just have to accept what Congresswoman Maxine Waters said to me many years ago. Cynthia, you just have to accept that when the leadership tell us to do something, we're going to do it. And that's just sort of you could say the price of incumbency is your values.
Boom. The price of the incumbency is your values. Maybe the squad should talk to Cynthia McKinney, but I don't think they're going to do that. I don't think they will do that. Now, Bree had a lot to say about this, obviously, because she has been vindicated along with Jimmy Dore. I want to show you a piece of the segment that she had from Rising about force the vote and possibly what we could have accomplished here.
Camp pointed out, we can't even swear in as members of Congress until we elect a speaker. We can't form committees until we elect a speaker. We can't investigate anything until we have a speaker. Heavens to Betsy, that sounds a lot like leverage to me. And isn't that the point? The entire Republican agenda is now in the hands of a handful of opportunistic Congress members. And Republicans are not quite sure what to do about it. Some McCarthy supporters are trying to paint this force the vote effort as a self-interested hostage-taking mission, ginning up antagonism against the rogue Republicans in the public eye and ultimately in their districts where they probably hope they feel it the most. Here's Representative Dan Crenshaw on Fox News yesterday.
Republicans have been waiting years for this opportunity to take over the House. And so when the rest of the country looks at how Republicans are handling day one, they can't unite, they can't come together. It's day one and they can't agree already.
Yeah, that's a shame. It makes us look foolish. If I didn't know any better, it's like the Democrats paid these people off.
That's really stupid, the comment that he just made there. But I do just want to say something about what Bree just said there that I think is important for people to really get through their heads. Yes, you have a small number of people that decided to use their leverage. And whether you agree with what they're asking for or not, that is besides the point. The point to be made is the fact that they are using their numbers effectively to make sure that they get something out of this deal. And the squad is not willing to do that. And they were never willing to do that. And they were not going to do that. And I'm going to get to a point here where Bree explains to you why that happened. So we're going to get to the Jimmy Dore is right portion here. Because I told you in the beginning, everyone was on board, but something changed. What changed?
In 2020, the situation was reversed. Democrats had a small majority in the House such that a handful of progressives, squad members alone, had enough votes to hold up Nancy Pelosi's nomination to lead the House. There were plenty of reasons, by the way, to do so. For one, AOC had previously gestured to the fact that she found it incredible that Pelosi had never faced a real speakership challenge in all her years. Moreover, we were at the start of the COVID pandemic and at the tail end of a progressive presidential campaign that delivered unprecedented public support for Medicare for all, along with other progressive policies. Did Bernie's loss mean that the movement representing a majority of Americans was supposed to die? And during a pandemic at that. Since Trump was still president, Democrats were still pretending to care about COVID deaths. And before the vaccines, when even young and healthy people were finding themselves hospitalized or even dying from COVID, there was genuine energy around using the public health crisis as a springboard for improving our public health system, which, by the way, is the most expensive in the world, despite yielding worse results than peer nations. Disgruntled progressives who made up a significant part of the Democratic Party base had dutifully voted for Biden, despite warnings from folks like myself who said that doing so without establishing some conditions would mean that Biden would ultimately betray most, if not all, of his campaign promises. And in the weeks after the election, progressive YouTube Politico and comedian Jimmy Dore floated a simple idea to get something in return for those very progressive voters. An idea, in fact, that he gleaned from the DSA's own handbook. That is, you guessed it, force the vote. Progressive squad members could leverage their speakership vote to extract concessions from Nancy Pelosi. Now, unlike Republicans now, the left's asks were to be substantive, not just procedural. One key ask was a vote on Medicare for all, which was intended to keep the fight alive and draw a contrast between Democrats' claims that they want to improve health care for Americans and the fact that they repeatedly kill Medicare for all legislation as quickly as they receive money from the pharmaceutical industry. If you want to understand why the vote for Medicare for All was such an important ask, just look at what's happened over the last 2 years.
They couldn't even force the vote for Medicare for All during a pandemic when hundreds of thousands of people died in this country that year. They weren't even willing to do it during that. This is why I tell you, these people are never going to do anything for you. They weren't even willing to do it during a pandemic. That's terrible. Terrible.
Look at how California, with its Democratic supermajority legislature, killed a statewide Medicare for All bill. Or consider how silent all of the squad members have been about Medicare for All since the end of the Bernie campaign. Did 68,000 people a year stop dying from a lack of health insurance, or did it just become uncool to talk about it now that we're outside of a fundraising cycle?
Yep.
Now, some of us, fearful that exactly this would happen, rallied over the holidays in 2020, staffing phone trees and calling progressive Congress members furiously about the plan and even planning rallies. As left media figures debated the merits of the plan, people like David Sirota offered constructive additions to the ask, including a suggestion that Pelosi be forced to oust corporate Democrat Richie Neal from the Ways and Means Committee, where he was poised to stop progress on health care reform. What should be clear is
Richie, that's actually one of my representatives, by the way. He's awful. Just letting you guys know.
the specifics of the ask were much less important than the following fact. Nancy Pelosi was obviously an enemy to the left and should not have been voted for without gaining something significant in return. After AOC's first notable day in Congress, during which she protested with climate activists in Pelosi's office, the longtime speaker made quick work of bullying the squad members into submission. An iron fist and a Gucci glove is how Politico described Pelosi once. And over the course of their first 2 years in Congress, the squad members largely submitted to said fist. But here was an opportunity to draw attention to the corruption that paid for that proverbial Gucci glove. The squad members could have demanded important committee assignments. As the current rebel Republicans have done, they could have forced a vote on banning stock trading by Congress members.
Yep.
After all, Pelosi's personal wealth has ballooned during her decades in office, widely out of proportion to her congressional salary.
They didn't ask for anything on the national level. They just, from what I understand, after that, Cori Bush said she got something for her district. But when it came to getting all of us something on the national, they didn't ask for anything on the national level. And I want to know what the something is that she supposedly got for her district too, because she didn't say.
This is a woman who famously defended congressional stock trading despite the clear conflict of interest and insider knowledge Congress members possess. This is a woman who just presided over the quiet death of a bill to end congressional stock trading, one that was arguably designed to fail in the first place. But instead of choosing that moment to fight, to highlight the corruption of the Democratic Party, and to lead a genuine populist movement that stood a chance of waking people up to the limitations of the two-party duopoly, something curious happened. A call seemed to go out to leading figures in the progressive media that they should force the vote. Although I first heard of the idea from Sam Seder, host of the YouTube show Majority Report.
That part right there. See, this was the first time I heard that. I didn't know that before. So Bree told you that a call went out to the progressive commentators that I guess wanted to do like force the vote. As I told you before, apparently all of them were on board in the beginning. So here's my question. Who made that call? Where did that call come from? Who was the one that picked up the phone or sent the text message or the DM and told people to fall back? And was that someone in the media space or was that a politician? Because something that I noticed was that AOC had mentioned that she wasn't going to do it. This is when AOC and Justin Jackson, they went back and forth on Twitter for a while. I don't know if you guys saw that whole exchange, but during that time, they were going back and forth on Twitter. right? That she wasn't going to do it because she was going to try to get concessions with the $15 minimum wage. And we saw that did not work out. We saw how that went, right? So what I noticed was it seemed like after AOC said that she wasn't going to do it, that was when TYT backed off. That's what it seemed like. I could be wrong, but that's what it seemed like to me. But who made the call, you guys? See, we have to start asking these questions. If it was a politician who made that call, let's say it was AOC or someone, then that right there let you know that, again, those people who pulled back are maintaining the status quo so that they can have access to the politicians. Something to think about.
Who said he supported Jimmy Dore's idea despite having a long-standing feud with Jimmy. He quickly changed his tune, alluding to a call he'd received that discouraged this approach. A call from whom? We could only guess. The legacy left media all quickly turned against the idea, with large accounts like the Young Turks, Majority Report, and others spreading outright misinformation about the risks of what might happen if the squad declined to vote for Nancy Pelosi. They repeatedly claimed, wrongly, that Kevin McCarthy would become Speaker of the House by default.
This is why when some people ask, like, why do you guys, say rag on like Anna or Jink or whatever? Because you have to understand that they have one of the largest platforms in this space. And when they send a message like that message from Force the Vote, when they said that Kevin McCarthy would become Speaker, that resonated with some people. And then the smaller channels have to try to come back and be like, defend it and say, no, that's not true. And let me explain to you why. And they got that message out to a lot of people. Same thing with Sam Cedar. He did the same thing. So when they control the narrative, we're never going to get anywhere in reference to progress because they are misleading their viewers on purpose. Just like I showed you earlier with Anna Kasparian, she was gaslighting her viewers. You're a gaslighter. So this changed the whole game. Do you know how much more pressure would have been put on the squad if TYT and Majority Report would have stayed on for that project? They're the bigger channels.
Of course, as we all saw yesterday and today, that was never true. Hakeem Jeffries is not magically Speaker of the House despite earning more votes in the first count than McCarthy did yesterday. You need a majority of the House, not just a bare majority, to be Speaker. And yet the lie was so pervasive that Pramila Jayapal herself lied directly to former Rising host Ryan Grimm's face when he asked her during an interview why she voted for Nancy Pelosi.
See, guys, this is exactly what I was talking about. I'm going to play this call here from Ryan and then we'll cut it. But this is exactly what I was talking about. The lie was actually making its way around. It wasn't just making the way around in left independent media. You even had a politician spread that same lie. You see how this works? So dangerous.
About demanding real concessions.
Now, there were some pundits and left-wing media personalities ahead of this vote who were urging the CPC to use the vote for Speaker as leverage to extract a floor vote on Medicare for all. Why didn't the CPC end up taking that particular route?
Well, I'm sympathetic, obviously, as the lead sponsor of the bill, to people who are frustrated that we have not moved to a single-payer system yet. But the reality is that this is a very slim margin. The vote for Speaker was between Kevin McCarthy and Nancy Pelosi, and throwing the entire chamber into chaos would have been very detrimental for the election.
Did you hear that? Did you hear that buzzword? Chaos. Do you guys see? They all use the same words, the same vocabulary, the same message, the same framing, the same narrative. AOC used it, chaos. Jamal Bowman used it, chaos. This interview did not happen this week. They're all just spreading the same narrative. Chaos. Come on, Pramila, tell them again.
Use the vote for Speaker as leverage to extract a floor vote on Medicare for all. Why didn't the CPC end up taking that particular route?
Well, I'm sympathetic, obviously, as the lead sponsor of the bill, to people who are frustrated that we have not moved to a single payer system yet. But the reality is that this is a very slim margin. The vote for Speaker was between Kevin McCarthy and Nancy Pelosi. And
No, it wasn't. What? The vote was between Kevin McCarthy and Nancy Pelosi. What is she talking about? What is she talking about? They had the majority.
throwing the entire chamber into chaos would have been very detrimental for the Electoral College vote and everything else.
I later confronted Ryan about his failure to push back against Jayapal's claim on my podcast, and we had a constructive conversation about how things could have been handled differently. But since squad members rarely open themselves up to questioning from anyone in progressive media outside of Ryan Grimm at The Intercept, that missed opportunity was one that carried the lie that Kevin McCarthy could become Speaker if Democrats force the vote far and wide.
That was another CIA tactic. Let's come up with the reason why it can't be done. So they spread a lie. And a lot of people said it. A lot of people believed it and were saying it. Spreading that lie. And that really is what prevented Force the Vote. Like I think there were like 1 million people watching that night, but that is really what prevented Force the Vote from really having even more pressure on the squad. Because they took that lie and they ran with it. And we need to ask this question too. And Ryan Grimm's been on here and he's been on with us at RBN as well. We need to ask this question too. Why does Ryan Grimm continue to have access with the squad, but the people whose channels promoted the squad and helped them get elected have no access to the squad at all? Because Ryan Grimm is not going to push back on the squad. Ryan Grimm is going to defend them and defend the narrative. There's a reason why he's in that position. Because if it was any one of us, we would not be in that position, because we would heavily criticize them and call them out for the things that they're not doing. People like us, we don't get access to the squad members, whether we help them get elected or not. So what you have to understand is everybody is playing their parts. Ryan Grimm is there as the White House bureau chief for The Intercept. And to maintain his access, he runs cover for them, does what he can here and there, but he runs cover for them. And to maintain this idea that they are legitimate progressive politicians and keep the American people thinking that there's somebody in there that's actually fighting for us. They're not. That's his part. TYT has their part. They'll push back a little bit, but never to the extent where they will lose access to politicians. That's their part. Oh, and they'll smear anybody else for a right wing for doing so. Majority report the same thing. And all these people will come together and just run a lie. And that's what happened with Force the Vote. And too many people believed it. And we couldn't even get one politician to show up to the town hall because they ran with that lie.